If we'll talk about some other players now, so one thing, I mentioned him there, he's not in the team anymore, obviously he's Alexi B, who now, since then, went to G2 and then now is in NIP, obviously. Right, this is someone where I know a little bit because luckily when I did Blast and Flashpoint, I literally got to hear the comms, so I've actually heard him comm a bunch of games, which is very unique. I have to say it's quite cool compared to just guessing what other people are like or from stories. So give me your take, Ruggah. What was it like to work with this guy? What type of an IGL is he?
I think he's a very modern IGL that knows what he wants as soon as the round starts. I think he was also good at adjusting along the way. I think some sort of mix between Glaive and Kerrigan. I think at some points he sacrificed himself a bit too much to get that view going for him. Also why he had like very highs and very like low lows individually. So I think the whole package was there. I think he had some problems getting it all like mixed together, at least in OG. I think where he landed now in NIP could be very good for him. I think the way he thinks of the game, the pace and everything he wants to play with, like very, let's call them dynamic players. I think they fit Alexi B's playstyle a lot. I think when he was leading the team, I think we had pieces that wanted to think more for themselves. And I think that probably was also one of the reasons why it never really clicked in the end. We have heard the same story about being on the same pace, right? Too many cooks in the kitchen, all this type of stuff. And at the same time, he was also a guy that wanted a lot of authority. So it was also hard to kind of, let's say, digest it in a way where everyone felt comfortable and could move along the same direction and focus on winning. Because I think he is a very good in-game leader, but I also think the pieces around him was probably not doing their parts the best to make him look good either. And then mix in that I think he was also searching a bit for how he wanted to play on both sides. Like I think the T side, he was also very modern, like knowing the meta and everything. But on CT side, I felt like he found his footing for us. Like he tried to be the anchor, he tried to be the rotation, he tried to be kind of in the star player position, but it never really clicked. Whether it was because of international teams or just seeing the game a bit different, I actually don't know to this day. But I still have some very good memories with him, and I really like Alexi as a person.
What's your thoughts on Alexi Legija? Because obviously he can be a bit of a controversial people. Some people think he's like bad or something. I don't fucking know what people think, mate. I would just say he's underrated, by the way.
Underrated, yeah. I think too. I think perfect what Ruggah actually said, and it makes a lot of sense. Let's say when he had this NC team, apart from Alu, who is like this, I don't give a fuck guy, kind of everybody knows that. He had like his 3 young players, so everybody followed his philosophy. Everybody was listening to him, and he was like what you said. What didn't work in OG with the players wanting to make their own decision, everything. I think it makes sense that it fits like his style, because with NC he had huge success with a way weaker team like individually. So I think if you would have had him now, for example, I think with these players that you have, it would make a lot of sense. Not to take credit away from Nexa, but he is the classic IGL, and I think if he gets like the authority, is it the right word? Yeah, I guess. Yeah. From all the players and full trust of them, and if he has these young players that he can teach and show them the way he wants to play the game, I think he could be a very, very good in-game leader, and I still think that he can bring any team to the top 5. And I think that he's individually even not that bad as most people even put him to be. I think he had great games. He has games where he really shows off, but as you said, he has his highs and very low lows. So if he finds stability in that, I think he can really make a team great. I don't know, to be honest, if it's going to work out with NIP, because in the past, I don't think they were like the kind of were, but not really the most structured team, in my opinion. So I don't know if it's gonna clash with his playstyle. But if everyone has full faith in him and trust him, and makes him and follows his leading, I think they can actually become a good team.
I can see what you mean about Legija in the sense that if people don't know, the majority of the best Swedish teams of all time really were almost like, it'll sound rude to say it, but it almost was like POG CS. Like they just do a default, and then the joke was, they think this is just the way you play CS. It's like, bro, that's what you do if like Olaf Meister's there and fucking Flusher's there, and like, they're just the greatest players ever, you idiots. Like, that's not a style of play. So the flaw I always thought was exactly when you make a team like this, like younger players and people who haven't all been to the top. So that's why I could see both sides of the game. I could see the angle where maybe they won't like his as much. But I also think on Ruggah's point, like, these aren't players who are going to be like pretty sure I've already said, I've heard the comments before. The most notorious lineup was the one where it was like NBK would be giving his thoughts. Even Valde would say some shit like, "Oh, what about this?" And it's like there's like 3 people doing that, and then on the side, Issa would just be saying stuff as well. Like, "I'm going to go out long," and like, and it's not a joke. I've for real heard Alexi B many times just be like, "Okay, everyone, shut up," right? And just so you could call like whatever he's going to call.
The thing is also people don't underestimate a lot how hard the life of the IGL is. Like whenever like things don't work, you have to imagine you have like sometimes 6-7 precs a day. You have to call the whole time, and let's say 3 or 4 out of them are just a little bit chaotic. This guy's not listening. I can imagine like Nico being back then super crazy and joking a lot around, just how I know him. So I think it gets also into your mind, and it's not that easy. You won't sleep at nights and stuff. It's hard, I think, for IGL. So you really, really have to fully trust your in-game leader to get the best out of him. If not, then it's just gonna be hard for him. Unless he just accepts the fact and says, "Okay, fuck it. Coaches give me every time a game plan. I call according to that, and then you deal with the players." This is kind of how I do it. I give my players the way of how I want to play the game. I scold with the in-game leader if he doesn't how do you say it? Bring it on the table like how I want it. And if we lose, I take the blame. That's it. It's okay. And then he is out of the trouble, let's say, so he can live in peace afterwards. And I just have to deal with all the criticism. So it's fine. I don't know.
What about that then, Rug? A similar scenario for you then. Like, how do you, when you had Alexi, for example, what was the division of labour? How did you work together as a team? Because actually, like I've mentioned many times on past episodes, he was someone where sometimes it's funny that in the game, people look at his style with like the way that the calls are. They see that he calls it. So you remember when he went to G2, everyone was like, "Oh, he's going to micromanage everything," which obviously was an exaggeration. But what's funny is when I actually heard him on comms, I actually thought he didn't manage it off. I thought sometimes he did let him sort of talk over him a bit. And like I say, it was when it was the big moment is when he'd be like, "Right, shut up now." But like he definitely wasn't like a tyrant on the comms. So like, how did he manage it when he used to be back in the team with him?
I think, as I also mentioned, right, like he always demanded a lot of authority and ability to lead the team in his image. And it also goes kind of along with how I actually got into OG, kind of as the last piece. And when you come in as the last piece after the players, it's always like hard to really shake the boat because the power is already ultimately laid elsewhere, you know? So I think in that image, I think he did very good in terms of understanding how he wanted to play, how he wanted to prepare. I still think it was a bit random at times because he was still very young dealing with international teams. And if you want that kind of authority, you need to be very structured. And especially if you're not talking your like native language, I think sometimes you can like bang your head against the wall trying to fix something, even though at a lot of times it could also be fixed by giving like, I would say, power and authority to someone else. And I think that was probably one of the obstacles he had when leading OG, also because it was his first international team, that I felt like coming in as the last piece, I tried to adjust and do my best to help him. But at the end of the day, it also means that he needs to ask for help in the stuff that he was not so good at. So, but I think at the end of the day, like he did a very good job over the time he was in OG. I still think he could have given more responsibility away from him, but I think that goes for every coach that is not ultimately building the lineup themselves, that it's always hard to really change things once things are set into motion. And I also look back at that time a lot of times thinking, okay, what could I have done different to help him? What could I have done to make the team successful? And at the end of the day, I think we got a lot of like close to the maximum out of the teams we had. I would also say if it was the first iteration, had COVID not hit, we probably would have had like more data to understand how good was the team, how high could the peaks be, but also understanding whether we needed to change or not. So with the first group of players, I think we got a bit unfortunate, but ever since then, we tried to build the image of the team like together, me and Alexi, I would say. And I think a lot of decisions since then was kind of us trying to find the way for OGB to be successful, kind of in his way of leading the team, I would say.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.